Hi everyone. Miguel, when you want, you can start. I
Sure,
think.
I was just about to ask that.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Well, for those who don't know me, my name is Miguel Costero. I'm a MERN developer here at BEON Tech, and today we are going to talk about GitHub Copilot, which is an AI-powered code assistant, as the presentation says. And we are going to learn how it works, how we use it, and the benefits we get to using Copilot, and some potential alternatives and considerations that we need to take on when we are using Copilot. So this is what we are going to discuss today. So first, we need to learn what GitHub Copilot is. What GitHub Copilot is. So for those who don't know, GitHub Copilot is a powered code generation tool that was built by GitHub and therefore by Microsoft, which is the company that owns GitHub, in a collaboration with OpenAI, and was first released in June 2021 in a technical preview and as a final product in 2022. Copilot uses OpenAI Codex language model, which is a sibling model of GPT-3 to generate context-aware code suggestions for many programming languages and frameworks that you might use in your day-to-day task. So in order to know how GitHub Copilot works, we first need to understand what Codex is, OpenAI Codex. So the story goes by when OpenAI first released GPT-2 and GPT-3, they realized that people were trying to use it in order to generate code out of natural languages. And therefore, in response to that, OpenAI created Codex, which is essentially kind of like the same as GPT, but focus primarily on generating and interpreting code. And on Microsoft, by having private licenses over OpenAI and some of its products, then decided to use Codex for GitHub Copilot and adjusting for their needs and train it using millions of lines of code, as the presentation says, from public repositories hosted on GitHub. And some of the difference between Codex and GPT as it is right now is that Codex has a stronger focus on code generation, obviously, and while GPT is primarily focused on understanding and generating human-like text, natural language, for that matter. So let's understand first how GitHub Copilot uses Codex in order to suggest code. So as I mentioned, GitHub Copilot uses Codex to suggest code, but it does so by doing these 3 steps, right? So first one is context understanding. Copilot processes the input or descriptive comments surrounding the code context. I mean, whatever you have on your editor, and Codex is designed to recognize patterns and relationships, function names, punctuation, syntax, and which gives a better context to the language process to generate code. Then it goes, let's say, the magic, which is the token prediction. So in context models like GPT, a token is the smallest unit of text that a model can process. These can be words, parts of words, punctuation marks, or any other symbol for that matter. It may depend on the tokenization method that pre-trained model, pre-processing model is configured to do. So then once GitHub Copilot gets the context of the code that they are trying to use, they're trying to predict or generate code out of, or suggest out of it, then it tries to predict what the most likely next tokens are going to be based on the input and the context. The input being the type, what you're currently typing, or the function name, or maybe natural language that is hold between comment block. let's say. And after Codex, Codex generates the following token sequences. Then Copilot creates a code snippet out of it and show you right there on your IDE, making it easier to integrate this generated code into your project itself or your code itself. So one thing we need to keep in mind is that GitHub Copilot is context aware, so allowing the developers to have relevant suggestions on the code that you're currently writing. Let's say. We need to discuss what the key features of GitHub Copilots are, and the first one being obviously code suggestions. This is the primary feature that GitHub Copilot gives. As I said, code suggestions I provided to final users when you start to type code in your editor. So as soon as you start typing, Copilot can start to suggest code as you're typing. Codex being based on GPT and its natural language understanding, it can understand natural language on your code as well. So we can ask Copilot to generate code based on plain English that we type on our code in comment blocks, as we see on this little image on the presentation. In this case, we have asked Copilot to determine the sentiment of a text if possible using a web service, and then GitHub Copilot generate the code out of it. And also learns from your code base. So as soon as you use Copilot, it learns from your code and the way you write it, and along with suggestions you have accepted or suggest or ignore in the past. This helps Copilot to give you more useful and filtered recommendations over time. It makes coding easier and more efficient because it gets better at matching your personality, your personal coding style. Now we discussed context awareness. It analyzes the context of the files, stuff like function names, code comment, docstrings, file name, punctuation symbols, and then based on that, it can try to predict what the next lines of code are going to be. We also talk about learning from your code base. The more you use it, the better it gets. It learns for your code and the way you write it. It starts and it learns from the previous suggestions you have accepted or ignored in the past, and learns from that, and then compare when you have Copilot suggesting new code lines. It takes that in consideration and understand that what you have accepted or ignored in the past, and therefore predicting better fitting suggestions. Obviously, meanwhile, we have talking about while talking about the key features of Copilot, we can immediately start to identify what the benefits of using are. First one, obviously, it would be the productivity, how your productivity will improve. Obviously, GitHub Copilot can be used in several use cases, like transform comments into code, as I mentioned before. By just typing a code block, we can expect Copilot to generate codes that actually fits what you're asking Copilot to do. Stuff like maybe an example that comes out right now on my head, it can be asking Copilot maybe to generate a function that creates the sequence of a Fibonacci sequence. We can use it for out-of-field repetitive code. I'm talking about maybe while you're generating a sample data in a JSON format, Copilot, by using its context awareness, can identify what the structure of your objects are, and then generate another objects using fake data, and therefore save you tons of time. Saving you tons of time. Also, we can use it to create tests. We can ask Copilot in natural languages, in English or any other, or or other language like Spanish or maybe Portuguese to generate tests for a given piece of function. Maybe we can ask him to generate a unit test in Jest using that fits the test cases for a given function. And obviously we can use it to generate documentation. Try to create doc streams for your functions or methods and try to explain what this parameter is being used. We can use Copilot in order to get our imagination fly and complete and successfully document our code, which is very, very important. One of my favorite benefits by using Copilot, it's how it helps you working on unfamiliar ground. Let's say when you're working with a language you may not know completely, or with some frameworks that are new to you, or you don't have enough experience working on it. GitHub Copilot can help you offering syntax support, showing examples of some specific task, or using its natural language understanding to create code that gives you ideas on how to solve a certain problem. When you're getting started in a new programming language or framework, Copilot can serve you as a valuable guide to help you through the learning process. It offers several forms of support to ensure this smooth experience, such as this. And the other one I really liked, or one of its benefits, is that it's right there on your IDE. You don't need to go to any other external website or so on. It's just lives there. It works seamlessly and it's not intrusive at all. It works obviously as an extension of your IDE. It's currently supported by Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, all of the editors from the JetBrains family, and NailBean when you're working on the terminal. And the way it works is by using hotkeys, keys on your keyboard. When we start typing, and I don't know if you can see on the presentation on your screens, but the first screenshot shows you how it suggests a line of code that actually finished the implementation of a function. And in order to implement that, we just hit tab on our keyboard, and automatically that code gets typed into your function. Also, we can use hotkeys such as command open bracket or command closing bracket in order to accept or ignore our given suggestions. Obviously, this is a great tool, and we have seen what it can do and the benefits we get, but we need to understand what the limitations are and some ethical considerations that we need to take into account by using it. First one is that GitHub Copilot has its accuracy limitations. Sometimes it may suggest incomplete or incorrect code. Sometimes Copilot is heavily dependent on the context of your file. So if you have some ambiguous or unclear context, the tool may struggle to generate appropriate suggestions. Language and framework limitations, since this is an AI model, a language model, the way they get better is by the more data they have to be trained, the better, and the better suggestions you're going to get. Which this means is that basically the most, let's say, frameworks or languages are more popular frameworks or languages available when the AI model was trained, the better their suggestions you're going to get. This meaning is that frameworks such as JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, obviously they are hugely popular and one of the most languages used today, will get better recommendation as some others not used as much, such as maybe Rust or Elixir or any other new language or framework. Obviously, updates and adaptation. As an AI model, Copilot's knowledge is based on the data that it had at the moment that it had available at the moment that got trained. So it will not always be as updated as we want it to be. So it may not be aware of the latest frameworks or the latest ways to do certain stuff or certain certain best practices that have emerged since the last time the model got trained. Therefore, we need to be really careful about this. I have seen in the past that maybe Copilot was suggesting code using an outdated API such as HTTPX requests on JavaScript, and at the moment that suggestion we were given, the right way to do that right now, or the most updated, or the most accurate way right now, is to use fetch instead of that deprecated API. One thing really important that we need to take into consideration is the actually licensing and problems GitHub Copilot may have with intellectual property. Obviously, it raises concerns about licenses and intellectual property, just due to its reliance on public available code when it got trained. This meaning public repositories on GitHub. Some of the key issues may be generating code and the generation of the code and original licenses. Copilot may generate code similar to, or sometimes a copy from certain code that the AI model had available at the moment it got trained. So this raises the concerns about how original that code is, in terms of license terms or copyright infringement. And the other one is another one can be AI generated code ownership. GitHub obviously states that they don't own the code suggested by Copilot. Or its originality. It completely depends on the developer that implement that code in your workflow. So that's something that we have to really we need to have into consideration when using it. Licenses. Copilot doesn't consider licenses when generating suggestions, potentially leading to legal issues if developers unknowledgely incorporate incompatible code. I'm talking about maybe some copyleft license that force you to your product, if you're using that language, if you're using that project in your project you need to carry on. You need to carry on the license, the copyleft license. Copilot doesn't take that into consideration, so be aware of that. And obviously, liability and warranties, responsibility of damage or legal liabilities arising from potential bugs or vulnerabilities in generated code is certain. So to address these issues and concerns, developers should review the generated code and be aware of these potential problems. I have included here on the presentation some first one is a blog post that analyzes the legal implications of Copilot. Is really one I really advise you to take a look at it. And the other one that is included inside that blog post is open investigation and a potential lawsuit that some people, essentially open source developers, are trying to create an investigation. They are trying to push forward against Copilot and how they use their code and they are saying that is illegal and might come to potential issues. So when you have the chance, take a look at it because it's really interesting. Another important topic to talk is about privacy. Obviously, how GitHub uses the user's data in order to improve their products. I'm talking about how the sensitive information in training data, user data handling, code generation from private repositories, and code confidentiality. In order to be aware of this, also I have stated the privacy policies that GitHub stated on their website. But just to give it a rough idea, some issues that come, some issues and limitations regarding privacy might be how the code confidentiality generates code suggestions for property projects. There might be concerns about the confidentiality of the code that you're writing at the moment, and users may wonder if their code is being shared or not to GitHub, and how that code can be exposed or not, and concerns about the intellectual property. Take a look at the privacy policies for this matter. And I want to talk about also what the future might look like for Copilot and some alternatives. And obviously, I have to talk about ChatGPT. And the first one I wanted to address is Copilot Labs, which are experimental features that currently the GitHub team is currently working on. And these are the features that they have available right now. GitHub Copilot Lab works as an extension for your IDE. Currently, it's only available for Visual Studio Code, but I know Visual Studio Code is one of the most popular editors, so chances are that you're already using it. So GitHub Copilot, I strongly advise you to install this extension if you have a Copilot active. You have Copilot active in your workflow. It includes these interesting features, stuff like explaining code, code translations, brushes, and advanced unit test generation. Which are really cool. One of my favorites are obviously explaining this code. You can highlight a piece of code in your, highlight a block of code in your project and ask Copilot for explanations. It will try to explain what that specific piece of code is doing. And it's really cool. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. This is an experimental feature, but it might worth take a look at this. Other one is code translations. You just highlight a piece of code in a certain language, let's say JavaScript, and then ask Copilot to translate that code to another language that you select, maybe Python, maybe Go, maybe Ruby, whatever you need. It's really cool as well. Brushes is another interesting one. You can ask Copilot to enhance a piece of code. I'm talking about maybe adding types to a JavaScript function if you're trying to translate that function from JavaScript to TypeScript, making more debuggable, make the code cleaner or more readable, or all of those at once. And advanced unit test generation. This takes what I just mentioned, using natural language in order to generate unit tests for your code it takes that approach and make it better. It helps you to generate unit tests, essentially generating all of the use cases for a certain function. I try to understand what your code is doing, and then it generates those unit test cases and really useful assertions that you can use in order to give you an idea and start testing your code and saving time by having Copilot to generate those tests. I have included the links on this presentation, so you go ahead and check it out, because it's really cool, and it costs, and once you have a Copilot license, it's free. So check it out. I want to also talk about Copilot X. Copilot X is not a product per se, but it's more like a set of features that GitHub is envisioning Copilot to be in the future. and that may eventually become, and in the future they may eventually become available for public. But right now, all of these features are in close testing or interview or technical preview. So you need to sign up on a wait list in order to get access to them. But I have highlighted here the most interesting to me features that this new version will include. Stuff like context-aware conversation. Basically, they are starting to add a ChatGPT-like experience into your editor, in which you can basically talk to Copilot and ask for help. Basically, includes all of the features that we were talking about in Copilot Labs, stuff like explanation of codes, generating unit testing, and brushing. When I'm talking about brushing, I'm talking about make the code more readable or clear, or adding types, stuff like that. All of that embedded in a chat experience, which sounds to be really cool. Another one really interesting is Copilot for pull requests. What this means is you will no longer be required in order to generate descriptions for all of your pull requests. Imagining how much time that will save. Then when this feature gets released, you can just ask Copilot to generate a description of your pull request. And since it will already have the context of your project, because it's been installed on GitHub and all the stuff, it will be a description that actually fits what you're trying to do. And another one that is really interesting, I think this one is my favorite, is Copilot for CLI. And it's basically human natural language for your terminal, natural language support for your terminal. What this will allow us to do is to basically talk to your terminal and ask for generate the terminal comment, ask for the terminal comment for the specific thing that you needed to do. Some ideas that come to the top of my mind is maybe asking Copilot to generate the AWS CLI, the AWS command, in order to generate maybe a new EC2 instance on your Amazon Web Service cloud. And then it takes it even further by not only generating the command, but also explaining what it's trying to do and what are the arguments that are being sent, that are being passing along. So that one for me, it's really cool, and I can see in the future how it can save. It can help me to save a lot of time. Obviously, code suggestions is not a new thing in this world. It has been around for quite a while now. Obviously, GitHub Copilot is not the first one, but in my opinion, is the best one. But also, here are some alternatives that you might want to check it out. Tab9, which is coming from an independent company that basically does code suggestions, and it's right there implemented in your IDE. And the competition of the proposal from Amazon, which is called Code Whisperer, which can suggest code as well. But in my opinion, these services are not as good as Copilot. But don't be shy to try them for yourself, and you will see how well they goes or not. But in my opinion, none of them compares to obviously ChatGPT. My mind actually got blown away meanwhile I was preparing for this presentation, for this workshop. I have asked ChatGPT a bunch of questions regarding code. Obviously, I have asked to generate code for me, which can do, and it does well. For instance, I asked ChatGPT to generate a Fibonacci sequence, a function that generates a Fibonacci sequence. But I don't know if you will be able to see right now from on your screens right now. But after this workshop is finished, I will share the links to the presentation, obviously, so you can check it out. But what I did here is basically I took a currently production used piece of code. So a piece of code, and ask ChatGPT to basically explain it. And just so you know what this function is doing, in case you can see, it's trying to get the IP address of a user that is trying to access the project, and trying to get try to get the geolocation and the country code out of that IP address. For that is using Cloudflare and some other external services in order to get that. But then I asked, just out of curiosity, to ChatGPT to explain that code, and it blew my mind how accurate it did, and how actually and the level of details that ChatGPT got. So essentially told me that it was an asynchronous function that received the request of the request object, and takes its arguments and get the country code associated with the client's IP address pointer, what I just told. I didn't give ChatGPT any context about this code. I just went to ChatGPT and pasted this line of code, and even told me little catches, and explained to me what some of the items on these codes are. For instance, this double column, double point, and one number meaning, which is told me that it's a IPv6 loopback address. Essentially, it's the IPv6 equivalent to localhost. And it told me that it's being used in order to fetch from Cloudflare and convert the text to JSON, and basically parse that using JSON parse, and then get the log property, which represents the country code, and assign that to a variable called country code. And even told me that this function can be used in server-side context. For example, an XAS application with this code is actually being used for an XAS application with that actually blew my mind a lot. I didn't give you any context about this function, but I even took it even further and asked ChatGPT to find, for instance, potential bugs. And ChatGPT even kept the context, of the conversation, and told me some potential bugs that they found. For instance, the IP address format. What happens if the format is not valid? How we are going to mitigate that issue? Stuff like rate limiting. What will happen if Cloudflare Trace API or IP API, which is the other service that we are using, might have rate limits, which essentially could cause potential downtimes in our service. What happens if the API response format changes, and all of this stuff, by just asking to find some potential bugs. So that's actually really impressive. And obviously, I also asked ChatGPT to improve the code, and even he was able to identify that it's a TypeScript code, and even explain what the improvement it made over that code, which is actually really, really, really cool. So in conclusion, I wanted to summarize what the GitHub Copilot and other tools that ChatGPT can do for you. And essentially, all it does is boils down to improve your productivity by making repetitive tasks for you. It's a learning tool for beginners, or when you don't have enough experience with a framework of language. Also supports multiple languages and libraries, and it actually reduced the amount of boilerplate that we code, because it code that for you. It's your copilot, it's your helper. Obviously, some potential drawbacks of using Copilot may be the intellectual property concerns that we just discussed. Over reliance, we may tend to rely on Copilot too much, and reliance on Copilot too much, and because some of the other issues, it might give you incomplete or incorrect suggestions, leading to potential problems, ethical concerns and security concerns that we just discussed. But in my personal experience, I think it have made me a more productive developer, rather than better, but a productive developer. Even though if the suggestions are incorrect or incomplete, it gives me a hint or an idea of how that implementation should be, or it can even help me design code patterns, or asking in natural language how to build a singleton and stuff like that. I don't know. Or maybe one of the use cases I regularly use is to generate regular expression, because I have never learned how to write them, but Copilot is really good at that. So I encourage you to try GitHub Copilot and let us know, and let me know how it goes. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Miguel. I will take advantage of that, and I will use this workshop to let everyone know that BEON will add a new benefit for everyone that want to use it. And if you want to try GitHub Copilot, you can ask your TEM, your Talent Experience Manager, and we will add $10 to your monthly payment. So you can try it out, and well, you tell us how it goes.
Great.
Excellent.
If you have any questions, now it's time, and maybe we can discuss further and GitHub Copilot and the impact it have on our day-to-day tasks. How many of you use Copilot right now? I'm that curious. Yeah, I think I have some examples here on the presentation, but actually what I can do is to actually share my screen and show you how Copilot works. Give me 1 sec. And I can pull. Let me know if you can see the editor.
Yes.
Great. We can, right now I have enabled Copilot on my local environment, and let's ask, I don't know, to create a hello world function, let's say. It automatically starts suggesting me the code. I just hit type and it will auto-complete the code. That's basically one way we can use it. Another word, it even suggests me block comments out of it, call the function, like that.
Miguel, can you generate a test for that function?
Sorry?
Can you generate a unit test for that function?
Yeah. Not maybe an accurate one, because
it doesn't have a return, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But we can edit it. And have Copilot to regenerate.
Amazing.
This is the Copilot Copilot Labs feature that I was mentioning at the beginning. And see, maybe let me. These are all experimental tools from Copilot, but these are really cool. We can, as I said, have Copilot to explain a certain function by just highlighting and asking Copilot. And essentially what it does is explain the function. It tells me that it's a function named hello world, and the function has no parameters. The function returns a string with a value hello world, and the ends the function with a semicolon, which is actually not correct, but okay. This is the other tool I was mentioning, language translation. I can take this function and maybe translate it to Python directly from the terminal, or some other like Objective-C, I don't know. Well, may fail. Maybe Kotlin, or even SAS. I did that the other day. Generate me the form. That didn't work, but I tried with a separate, with a different function. This is the other tool I was mentioning, brushes, in which we can ask Copilot to maybe add types to that function. As I said, he added the return type of the function. Maybe there's no sense to make it more robust, but because it's already robust, but he added, in this case, he added the name parameter, and then he's trying to identify if the name is not empty or not. But one of the also cool tools coming from the Copilot Labs is the ability to suggest tests. You can see it actually generated the test for this function more accurate. Yep. Do you have any other questions or something you might want to see? Yeah, this is really cool. I highly advise you to install this library on your development environment. It's really cool, and I have been using it a lot. Shout out to Facu that actually showed me this.
For me, it's been kind of useless. Like, in my day-to-day, I don't use labs as much as Copilot itself, but it's fun to play a little bit with it. You have time.
Yeah, you have time.
One of the great advantages of Copilot over ChatGPT, people are using a lot ChatGPT, but Copilot actually takes some sort of sneak peek of your environment. There are some extra info that, imagine that every completion is a request that it is sent to the API without the context, your code over there, your files to some extent, and then it goes there. So you usually get a better completions based on your context if you just go and ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT it explains everything that does not happen in Copilot. And that's why they're doing Copilot X, right? Because they're adding this chat interface to Copilot to be able to merge both worlds.
One of the biggest advantages of GitHub Copilot over ChatGPT is that it gets the context of your project or your files and everything you're currently working on, and then takes that and actually suggests better code because it has that information. ChatGPT on the other hand does not have that, or it's not that easy because it's not that easy that ChatGPT has the data, because you can obviously send a bunch of files and then try to ChatGPT to understand what is going on there, but it's not intuitive at all. The way I like to see Copilot X is like it's ChatGPT but for code. Actually, Copilot X it is based, and it will be based on GPT-4, which it will give Copilot a better context and understanding. It will be a better tool overall. Our project dependency packages. They are not, as I mean, they are taken into consideration. They are taken into consideration because you understand the context of the file you are currently working on. I mean, it will see that you have maybe imported a certain part of that, certain part of that package, and therefore identify that you are using that package, and then finding and then generate a suggestion based on that. How good is it to understand the whole project? Yeah, that's true. How good is it to understand the whole project, or does it focus on just one current file? Copilot, just to answer this question, how good is it to understand a whole project, or does it focus on just on the current file? Copilot, it's better and when working on a small piece of code, right? Talking about a function or maybe a method or something like that. So it's better on the context when the context is smaller. It will not provide you guidance on how to create a whole project or stuff like that. It will give context. It will have context. I mean, as soon as you use Copilot, it would learn from you and would learn from your project, and it will suggest chunk of code or snippets of code. So it will be better, but long story short, it's better if you use it on small units of code. Yep, that is true. Yeah, generating a full project with just AI, it's not, let's say, suggestible right now. But the way you should think AI tools and Copilot, ChatGPT, Tab9, or Code Whisperer is that they are essentially guidance. They will provide guidance to you in your day-to-day task, meaning in order to, as I said, complete annoying complete out of field functions that are not completed. Copilot will understand it, then maybe close a couple of brackets or a couple of parentheses or stuff like that. Generate functions and stuff like that. It will guide you through that. It will help you to build that. But at the end of the day, it will always be required to develop hands. I mean, you need to know what you're writing, what you're creating, in order to help, in order to have Copilot or any of these AI tools to help you. Because if you don't know, then the tool itself will not be as helpful as you might think. It does. Not actually on the linter rules. What it does is to take into account how you have written code in the past. I'm talking about indentation and semicolons versus single colons in the case of JavaScript, obviously, and stuff like that. But it does not take consideration linter rules. Maybe in the future it will be when Copilot X gets released and is better trained on the context of your file, but for the time being, not. Yeah, that statement from Facundo is absolutely true. It helps you on repetitive tasks and annoying code, or generating reject functions, regular expressions. So because they are a pain in the ass to write. Great. Is there any other question? Something that you might want to share or talk about? What do you mean of window visibility, Joe? Of usability?
I mean, so ChatGPT 4 has something around 40 pages of context at most. And that's much smaller for Codex, which is an older generation of the GPT model, right?
Yeah.
And so if you have too big of a file, you might not get the correct contextual suggestions. And so that's always a good idea to keep it small for your sanity and for Copilot. So don't make giant files. Keep with smaller files, break them apart, and it will be more productive on Copilot side as well. I'm not sure. I didn't research, but it might be less than one whole page of context or something like that.
Yeah, I don't have the exact number of the size of the context that Copilot or Codex can handle. But yeah, I mean, the smaller your units of code and logic is, the better suggestion you will get out of any AI tool for that matter.
Let's see if ChatGPT knows how to answer that. No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. It tells you, as of my knowledge, in September 2021, I don't know what you're talking about. No, it doesn't. Great. I think we are set, Mika.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Miguel. Thank you everyone for showing today. It was really interesting, and make sure to ask your team if you want to use these benefits, and they'll organize that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for joining. Hope you had a great time. And
Thanks, Migue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
bye. Have a
Thank
nice
you, guys.
one.
Bye-bye.